Finding your forever plus one feels increasingly more difficult, especially when you have people tweeting things like, one thing I'm starting to notice is a number of my friends are in medium-term relationships with a partner who clearly isn't really passionate about them at all. Wow. Why has this happened so frequently now? Or maybe it's always happened. I don't know why a lot of people don't consider that possibility. We just say, oh, things are getting so much worse with the dating market. And yeah, the statistics clearly show that. But now people really don't stay in relationships unless they are a perfect match or if they are really forced to stay within that relationship. Before, relationships were more common because of one thing, which is the fact that you basically needed to get married to do things in this country, especially as a woman. But the other fact is because of the bad things that have developed from our current modern society. The things that are spawning people to have more situationships. The first reason is because, well, you just have so many other options, or at least there's the perception of having more options. When you're seeing everybody online posting their relationships that seem perfect but are really just as kind of broken as yours and nobody's fully committed to it, and you also are constantly being fed images of people who look more attractive than your partner, it gives you the false perception that most people in this world are a lot more attractive than they actually are because, filters, showing only people at their perfect moments, all these things you got to take into account. And then there's the accessibility and the availability of it as well. You could just go on a dating app, get a swipe, and then you have a potential partner or someone who you know is attracted to you. And those dating apps are designed to be addicting. I'm sure most of you guys know this by now. I'm sure most of you guys are sick of dating apps, but the full-on committal and the feeling like you're actually loved by someone, I believe is not just a big part of the reason situationships are on the rise, that people aren't taking relationships and the idea of marriage or a long-term commitment more seriously, but also platonic partnerships. I think there's such a strong symbiotic relationship between platonic and romantic relationships. I think they're very similar. Platonic relationships require a lot of the same things as committed romantic relationships. You need to consistently show up for a person. You need to show them you actually give a shit about them. It's basically everything besides the whole kissing and fucking part. And even in the platonic relationship sense, you could potentially find other people to be friends with. But I think for that problem specifically, it's more so the fact that people just have less opportunities to meet up in person and to actually hang out in a group and consistently get those sessions in to get to the point where they eventually open up and they have experiences together that deepen their relationship. And this is another thing with situationships as well, is the deepening of the experiences and what it takes to get to the point where you're getting past small talk, to the point where you are actually starting to know who this other person is and for what they are, besides what you just see on the surface. And I think a lot more people are less willing to do that these days because of things like social media, because we're constantly raising our standards and basically everything's being inflated. Beauty standards, like I said, what people expect out of other people. They expect them to be perfect beings. And so when you're not acting like that perfect being and there's a potential that someone shows a flaw, like that's more scary than it was in the past, because we don't see a lot of imperfections in the content we consume, in most of the things we're consuming on a daily basis. And if you never get to the point where you start seeing someone's imperfections, you guys start like sharing some pretty shitty stories about yourselves or just some insecurities, like that's when you really get to know a person. That's when you know that you can start to trust a person, is if they say something and they either you either reciprocate it to them without judgment, or they just completely accept you for who you are. That's how relationships strengthen and deepen. God, my nose is itchy now. I look like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. But I want to get into the bulk of the video now. What this is really going to be about, why the rise of situationships are happening, and why people, they just don't understand what it really means to find love or create love or develop love. I made a tweet about this today and it did really well, and I felt it was just a really important topic to convert into video format. So a lot of young people and even old people's idea of falling in love is based on this fantasy that has been created through media sources. We think we're going to just stumble upon the perfect person and it's going to be love at first sight, and you're going to have this weird conversation where you guys mesh about something. You're like, oh, you're interested in that too? Yeah. Oh, yeah, me too. And then you look into each other's eyes and then you're all happy and you're like, hey, we should go out sometime. And then you just have a bunch of great moments over and over and over. And then you guys are in love. Well, I'd argue that if you guys only had perfect moments where every single time you guys hang out feels like an absolute dream and you don't have any problems, I don't think that's love at all. I don't think that's how love develops, at least not in my experience. And now, being the fiance, soon-to-be husband that I am, I think I have enough experience with this to know what love really looks like and know how it develops and know how it can develop in a platonic relationship even too. So there's really two steps that happen within the process of developing love and finding love or becoming true soulmates. And the first step happens when you two disagree with each other. So all relationship issues stem from a disagreement about how the other person acts. For instance, let's say you say a statement and it sends your partner into fight or flight mode, and then you get confused because it's never been interpreted that way. Or maybe your partner spends what you perceive to be as an unusual time away from their phone every single day, and you feel a lack of affection due to that, and to your partner it just seems like who they've always been. It's just a natural part of their being, just not being on their phone as much. What you got to do in this moment is you got to communicate these differences without judgment, and you have to communicate them effectively. That means, can you express your concerns without any sort of hostility or accusatory tone? Can you say, hey, I didn't really like the way that you did this. This is how it made me feel, and I would much rather prefer if now on, you spent a little bit more time just confirming to me that everything's okay by texting me more often. Like, that would make me feel more secure in this relationship. That's a healthy way to communicate how you want to need to be met in a relationship. So most people never get to this step, right? Like, if they have disagreements, they'll either immediately go into defensive mode. They'll say like, well, that's not a big deal. What does it matter to you? Like, I've always done this. I've always not wanted to use my phone. And I don't want to be the person that has to use their phone more just so I have to text you more. Or maybe even worse, they'll start gaslighting you for it. Like, why do you think that's even a problem? Like, are you that insecure about me not being on my phone to text you? Like, what are you doing with your time that you feel insecure about that part of me? Like, what do you think is happening? And they'll start to convince you that you have a problem, that something is wrong with you. Now, in this example, I think it's genuinely helpful for you to raise this concern and talk about it. There are perhaps other examples we could go over where a person doesn't gaslight you, but instead is trying to really tell you like, hey, this is a problem that you have or an insecurity that you have. And you should probably work on changing that and distinguishing between those two. It could be a whole different video in and of itself if I went full on dating coach route. But I just wanted to give an example of like healthy communication for your needs that aren't being met by your partner. Now, here's the second step. This is where the love really gets developed. The next step is assessing whether you think these changes that your partner is suggesting will genuinely make you become a better person without changing the core of who you are. So really, do you like what this other person is suggesting? You might not love it. You might not like how hard it would be to change it, but maybe you know, like, oh, this is something I actually really want to work on. And I'm glad that they pointed this out, because otherwise I either wouldn't have worked on it or I wouldn't have even known that this was an issue or a need that my partner needed to be met. And I genuinely want to become a person who is more attentive to another person. Like, for example, let's say the guy points out to a girl that she's a little cold over text, or she's just away from her phone too much, and it makes him feel like there's a lack of affection. Perhaps she's like, yeah, I notice I do that, and I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to be a person who is super flaky. I've had other people kind of call me out on this, but I haven't really changed. But now is really an opportunity to change this part of me and become the person who's able to show more affection, especially over text. And this is something I want to work on. And this is the type of person I want to start becoming. So if the answer is yes to you like what the other person is suggesting, and you like the type of person that your partner will shape you to become, that's the biggest indicator that a relationship is going to last and flourish. I hadn't realized it in my previous relationships, but my previous girlfriends would point out things about me, and I'd get super defensive. I'd be the defensive guy. I might even gaslight them. It was just super immature. And deep down, I knew these were things I needed to change. I needed to become less insecure or more confident about where my girlfriend was and not need to check in on her all the time. If you guys have been watching this channel for a few weeks now, you'd know that I shared that I am an anxious attachment style. I'm so anxious, I'm sweating, and I need to take off my sweatshirt. My exes would point out genuine character flaws that I should have wanted to work on, but I was just too immature at the time. But with this relationship, I'm really starting to notice there are certain things that I must do and change, and there's a certain type of man I must become in order to not trigger my fiance. And those things would genuinely make me a better man. And those are things I've always wanted to get better at, but was too prideful to admit and change in the past. And now I am willing to do so. So that's another little side point, is like, you got to get to the point of emotional maturity where you're willing to take feedback, and you have to have a desire to change into the person your partner needs you to be in order for them to have their needs met. And sometimes that doesn't mesh with the person you want to become. And if that's the case, you might have to let that person go. But that's another reason why I think situationships are now on the rise, because with situationships, it's easy. You don't have to do that work. There's no commitment to becoming a different person or a changed, upgraded version of yourself in order to meet the needs of another person. It's just, oh yeah, we're just kind of a fucking thing. Because no one wants to do the hard work that is required to become a great partner and to eventually get to the point where you love someone, because that's where the love develops. It develops through that work, through that two-step process that I just outlined. It's not some random butterflies in the stomach, lustful feeling. You know, you just fucking fall in love with them the second you get all fucking wary-eyed and you're like, oh my God. No, that's not love, man. Love takes time to develop, and it requires you to collectively conquer the storms. That's how I like to explain it. Do you want to become the person that your partner will shape you to be? Now, we do a lot of work like this in my self-mastery school. If you aren't familiar with it yet, it's a group where we meet in a coaching call every weekend where we discuss our biggest goals. We keep each other accountable, because that's one of the biggest ways to actually stick to the identity you're trying to become. And I provide courses in there that allow you to develop that new identity, to build more habits where you genuinely want to wake up in the morning early and work out and you have fun doing all these things that progress your life, as well as learning more about yourself, more about your needs, which are really important to identify and know if you are to stop getting triggered and having something actually change in a relationship that isn't working out. There's a possibility you can heal it or save that sort of relationship, but you got to have that self-awareness. And that's part of what's taught in my course, the Ultimate Self-Mastery course in that school. So it's basically like an online school for people who are really into self-improvement, who can't find that squad of people in real life who are really committed to improving themselves, which is very hard to find in real life, just like real solid relationships. And the relationships I've built in there with the homies, platonically, is incredible. I can call those guys my friends now. We have a lot of fun. We're just learning, growing together. It's a fun community. So if you want to join, the link is in the description. And I appreciate you for watching this video. I need to turn the AC on.